Hello everyone, today's game is a highlight from the 2017 Speed Chess Championship. Specifically, it is a highlight from the epic match between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen. The finish in this game is tremendous fun, and it is the most fun that I have ever seen Magnus Carlsen have at a chess board. Without further ado, here's the game. Wesley opens the game here with knight f3 and then b3, so he's using a very non-theoretical approach to the opening. I think this is really common among top-level players these days in blitz. They don't like to get into huge theoretical battles and instead want to play quickly and try and come up with some wrinkle in these kinds of unique positions. Pawn d5 is interesting from Magnus. He's obviously fighting for the center, and he's the first player to use that d pawn to try and strike in the middle of the board. That becomes really important when you're playing English style openings where you have the c pawns advancing. The d pawn's got to be used at some point, and we get this immediate conflict after d5. The trade on d5 leads to a position where Magnus gets pushed around with his queen for a moment, but he keeps it on an active square on f5. And Magnus is in general adopting a little bit more of an active and dynamic posture here with more piece play. But Wesley So does have the d and the e pawn, so he's got an extra center pawn in his camp, so he's got a nice positional plus. In any case, the position is balanced, but there's lots to play for. Now we get rook c1, and here the position is going to drift a bit towards Magnus, but it's a blitz game, so the advantage is shifting a lot. We won't cover all of the shifts in advantage. After Wesley plays knight a4, he's trying to put pressure on the c pawn, but he's also sidelining his knight, and he's encouraging b6 and then bishop b7 here, which is going to create a lot of pressure against the white king side. Now, after b6, we get pawn to d4 here. The bishop does just go to b7, and now we get bishop d3. Now, you could have a bit of a perpetual draw here after the bishop falls back and forth between d3 and e2, but Magnus is going to avoid that because he does have a better position. Probably the best way, according to the engine, to avoid the draw was to pull back with the queen. Now, it seems like the queen is a bit awkwardly placed here, but she's out of the range of the white pieces and she's staying on the king side, so that moves like knight g4 and in general the presence of this bishop will put pressure on Wesley's position, and Magnus is much better here. Instead, though, Magnus falls back with queen to f5, and then after bishop d3, he's going to pull back to d7 with the queen. Now, the queen's not as good on d7, so I think that he's losing some of the advantage that he had in the pressure on the white position, but it's still very interesting, and the game continues. Bishop b5, pinning that knight here, trying to keep pressure on the c-file. Knight e4, very active knight. That knight's going to be a big player in the game to come. And now queen e2 here and queen f5, pawn takes c5. This is leading to an exchange on the long diagonal here. Bishop takes b2, and now knight takes b2. Probably queen takes b2 was a little bit better. The queen would be very nice on the long diagonal, and pawn takes c5. So after pawn takes c5, we do see that clear positional advantage for Wesley So, as he's managed to isolate the c pawn, and that c pawn is definitely a target. However, Magnus is still pretty active. He has the nicer bishop on b7, the nicer knight on e4, so he's still kind of holding the rough balance in the position. At this point, Wesley maybe goes for a bit of a questionable decision here. This is a very sensible decision. He plays bishop a6 to exchange off the bishop that we just said was the better bishop, that bishop on b7. That makes a lot of sense, but after the trade, Magnus's knights start to be really quite strong. We get knight to b4, and the knights on b4 and e4 are creating problems. The queen falls back to a5, trying to pressure c5, and then queen f6 is hitting the knight on b2, which runs to a4, putting more pressure on c5. However, that knight on a4 is now interrupting the queen's defense of the a2 pawn, so Magnus snatches that. And at this point, probably the best move, the move to keep some advantage for Wesley So, was rook to c4. This is just the most active square for the rook. The c5 pawn is still under a lot of pressure. It's basically going to fall. If Wesley can capture that pawn and be more active, then he'll be a little bit better. Also, the knight on a2 is still kind of out of play, so why not just leave it out of play, play the rook to c4, go after that c5 pawn in your own good time. Instead, Wesley tries rook a1, which puts the rook on the a file where it's not doing a lot, and it kicks that knight back into the middle of the board where it starts to create some big threats. Knight c3 here. We get knight takes c5, and now a very nice move from Magnus, which is creating problems, knight to d2. This is attacking both the f3 knight and the f1 rook, so you have to take it. We do get the capture, but that immediately introduces the rook to the second rank. So we're starting to see some concrete and very scary threats from Magnus's side. In this position, Wesley tries rook c1, which attacks this knight on e2, or knight on c3 that jumps to e2. This seems like it might have been a blunder from Wesley because you've walked into a fork, but it's not a blunder because after king h1, this rook on d2 is hanging. So if you capture, you're actually losing because both players capture a rook, but then this knight is trapped. So Wesley would win this position. Magnus responds then after king h1 by pulling the rook back to d5. Now this is a really strong move. The rook is obviously creating pressure along the fifth rank, attacking this pin knight. It's also eyeing the h file, which is something that's going to matter. And in this position, there is only one way for Wesley to play. The only way to continue here is rook ce1, moving the attacked rook and attacking the knight on e2. Now, this is kind of passive. You don't want to slide your rook over to e1. The rooks here are obviously really awkward, but this would hold the balance. After rook c to e1, the nicest move from Magnus is queen to d6. Now, you might here want to play pawn to b4, defending this pin knight so that you could still be attacking this trap knight on e2, but that would lose on the spot brilliantly. Queen takes h2 is a beautiful mate in 2. King takes, rook h5, Anastasia's mate. Magnus is actually one of the players who has previously played a very famous example of Anastasia's mate, the game Hammer, Jon Ludvig Hammer versus Magnus Carlsen from a Norwegian junior tournament, is an example given in all the textbooks of a perfect Anastasia's mate, and you would have another one right here in this variation. Because of this beautiful Anastasia's mate after queen d6, threatening queen takes h2, you have to capture the knight, not before. Rook takes e2, and then rook takes c5 here, and it's a little better for Magnus because his pieces are more active and more harmonious, but the position's pretty symmetrical. A draw is the most likely outcome here. In any case, that's not what happened.
All right, rook e2, yeah. Wesley, wait, no, there is the combo here. Queen takes f2. He just missed it. Oh, a highlightable moment.
Queen takes f2, that's right.
Just blundered it. Rook c2, queen takes f2. If white takes it, rook d1 was mate and bake, everybody.
Oh,
that's sick.
man.
And he's got knight g3.
Oh, jeez.
Wesley, Magnus cracking.
That's right. Wesley played rook c2. This makes a lot of sense. You're staying active on the c file, you're attacking e2, and you're defending c5. It's the most logical move in the position, but it loses on the spot. Queen takes f2. Mwah. Beautiful move here. The first point, of course, is that if you capture this queen here, then you have rook to d1 with a back rank checkmate. You can block on e1, you can block on f1, but we're just capturing that, and you have a beautiful back rank checkmate. Also, after queen takes f2, you are threatening what happened in the game. You get queen to e1 here, and then you have knight g3 check, a beautiful knight sacrifice. Its capture is forced, and then you get rook h5 with a mate on the h file. One of the things that I love about this finish is that after rook c2, queen takes f2, the finishing mate can occur both on the back rank or on the h file. So you have a really wonderful situation where this rook is acting on both lines perfectly to deliver that final checkmate. And Magnus's humor in the position where he finally lands knight g3 on the board is like just one of the most pure expressions of joy that I've seen him display at a chessboard, where he can often be a little bit grim. I hope that you've enjoyed that game. I certainly loved seeing it live. It was incredible. If you like the game and want to see more Speed Chess Championship games, then click the playlist that's sitting on top of the board. And as always, if you like the content, like, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of future videos. Hope to see you again in another video.